World War I was one of the bloodiest conflicts the world has ever seen. Fought with 20th century weaponry, but by generals who still used 19th century tactics, the war quickly devolved into a bloody stalemate. Though the massive loss of life appeared pointless, the defeat of Germany and her allies had far reaching effects on the map of Europe and spurred the growth of democracy in areas that had previously been under foreign imperial rule. This lesson will detail how the treaties and events immediately after World War I spurred the birth or rebirth of nations like Poland and Finland. Many of the problems which caused later strife in Europe, including many of the economic problems in Germany which allowed for the rise in popularity of Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party, were a result of the position taken by the victorious Allies. The Allied powers of France, Great Britain, the United States, and to a lesser extent Italy, blamed the Central Powers for the war and resolved that those nations should bear the entire burden of the war. The German delegation was forced to acknowledge their war guilt as part of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war. Germany was hit especially hard by post-war sanctions. The Central European nation was forced to abandon all frontier forts and other military structures, and its army was largely disbanded, only being allowed to keep a small force for domestic use. The German Empire had been cobbled together over the previous half-century was partially disassembled. We'll cover that in more detail in a moment. In addition, the most debilitating measure placed upon Germany was payment for the war. Indeed, Germany was forced to pay the wartime expenditures of other states and for rebuilding their countries. So colossal a fee, it was originally scheduled to be paid in installments until the 1980s. Though Germany was hit hard by the measures of peace dictated by the Allies, arguably the most important measure for the political map of Europe was the subsequent dismantling of the Central European empires. The Treaty of Versailles alone took away large amounts of territory from Germany, and these territorial losses isolated Eastern Prussia, the very state which began assembling the German Empire in the 19th century. Additionally, Germany was forced to cede Alsace and Lorraine to France, and France also occupied German territory in the Rhineland. Large parts of what had been Eastern Germany were incorporated into the new Polish nation, a state that had been dead for over a century but was now revived by the terms of the treaties. Separate treaties with Austria-Hungary dismantled that sprawling Eastern European state. The Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye and the Treaty of Trianon recognized the independence of several states who had already declared independence as the war was ending, and further severed the dynastic union between Austria and Hungary, acknowledging Hungary as a democratic republic without a monarch. The northern part of the empire, primarily inhabited by Czechs and Slavs, were made into the new nation of Czechoslovakia, or were given to Poland. In the Balkans, much of Austria-Hungary's territory became part of the state of Yugoslavia. The creation of many of these new states was done in large part due to U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, who pushed at the various peace talks for ethnic and national self-determination, meaning the boundaries of Europe should be redrawn to accommodate ethnic groups and allow them to choose their own forms of government. Naturally, this led to many of these post-war entities to adopt forms of democracy, including even in Germany, where the Weimar Republic was founded in 1919. The final defeated nation that received harsh treatment by the Allies was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire had been slowly declining in power and relevancy for more than a century, and defeat in World War I signaled its death. The settlement in formerly Ottoman territory was far different than in Eastern Europe. Rather than national self-determination ruling the day, the Ottoman Empire was carved up with an imperialist mindset. Large parts of the Middle East were given as international mandates to Great Britain and France, and reduced to little more than colonies. The Turkish homeland itself barely survived, requiring a nationalist government and army to be hastily set up by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk to defend itself and survive as a political entity. While the Russian Empire was not a central power, indeed for most of the war Russia fought with the Allies, it lost large amounts of territory in post-war Europe. This was due to the Russian Revolution and the collapse of the Russian Empire in 1917. Soon after the Bolsheviks gained control of the Russian government, the Russians ceased fighting with Germany, signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March of 1918. As a result, Russia lost large swaths of territory to Germany in Eastern Europe and in Scandinavia. However, after the defeat of Germany later that year, these states were not returned to the now communist state of Russia. Instead, these states were carved up according to the principles of self-determination. Along the Baltic coast, the independent states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were founded, while Finland was born in Scandinavia. In the south of Russia, territory was lost which later became part of Romania. The dismantling of these empires after the close of World War I had arguably the greatest impact upon the map of Europe we see today. The principles of national self-determination which helped redraw the boundaries of Europe after World War I were intended to alleviate points of conflict for future generations. Moreover, this notion fostered the growth of democracy in Europe, specifically in many of these newly instituted states. Unfortunately for Europe, other conditions in many of the treaties that created the new states also insulted and shamed the former Central Powers. For example, not only was Germany stripped of large parts of its territory, it was forced to admit guilt and pay for the war as well, a measure which ruined the German economy. While many of the measures taken at the close of World War I helped promote the spread of democracy and preempt strife, others created poor economic and social conditions which soon made nations susceptible to fascism, nationalism, and further warfare.